morning, and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is disappointment. It was meant to be yesterday's topic, but I had technical difficulties. So I think it's pretty funny, that if you showed up, you would have been disappointed. So I apologize for that, but I just love the little jokes that the universe plays on us, right? Anyway, before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and softly, softly, softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation, the tickling, the tingling, and allow that sensation to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Rosalind. So glad to see you here this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us this morning. Today's topic is disappointment, and I mentioned that I think it's so funny. Yesterday, the topic was meant to be disappointment, and I tried to get online. I had allowed my computer battery to die, and so it only had like 1% charge, and it wouldn't run things, and I just couldn't get it to function. So I was disappointed, and perhaps you might have been disappointed in not being able to join us as well. So pretty funny. Anyway, what is disappointment? And clearly, like, the very first aspect of disappointment is unmet expectations. So we're projecting expectations into the future or into a moment. And then when those expectations are unmet, we might experience disappointment. We might just flow with it, but we had this projection of how things might be and an expectation. And then there's, often, but not always, there's a expectation, projection, blame kind of dynamic that goes on with disappointment. Good morning, Robin. Welcome. It's great to have you here with us. We're talking about disappointment and what the dynamics are of disappointment. And excuse me. What the dynamics are of disappointment and how we might navigate situations to release ourselves from that sort of cycle, of expectation, projection, and maybe blame isn't always a necessary part of that dynamic, but it can come into play, where perhaps I assign responsibility to somebody else, to say, oh, well, it's their fault that I'm disappointed, so it's a very interesting thing that we can tend to do, and we get stuck in disappointment when really at the foundation is an expectation or saying this is how things should be, like that's the projection part. Having this idea about how things should be. Excuse me. So when we reside in disappointment, we kind of take on a bit of a victim role, like feeling at the effect of things, right? And so Rosalind says, is projection coming from a place of steering the wheel? What if there are many roads that lead us to the same destination, or keeping things the same? So this is sort of a mystical question, I think, Rosalind. It's pretty awesome. So is projection coming from a place of steering the wheel? Well, I don't know if it is. First of all, whether or not we steer the wheel at all, or whether it's a grand illusion, that's another great conversation, right? I'm not sure whether we steer the wheel or not. And when we project, I think we're trying to impose our expectations. Like when we talk about how things should be, what made us the authority? Like it shouldn't be that way, or it should be that way. Those are, and while I might engage in that kind of activity myself, shoulding things, like things should be different. Good morning, Bernadette. Welcome. It's good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about disappointment, but right now we're talking about projection and steering the wheel. And, we have ideas about how things should be. We have these ideas, and things should happen in a certain period of time. I'm a certain age, so my life should look like this. I have this kind of relationship, and therefore that person should behave in a particular way, right? And so we have our expectations, and then we project them with a should. And then if that person doesn't meet those expectations, we become disappointed, and then we blame them for not being or acting in accord with our expectations and projections. So that's kind of a dynamic, excuse me, that I've identified around disappointment. So I don't think that projection is coming from a place of steering the wheel necessarily. I think it is coming from a place of trying to override reality, at least that, or override or resist the way things are, at least in this context. Maybe when we're doing manifesting, we can consider that's projection as well, but that's in a different context than what we're talking about right now. So to continue with what Rosalind wrote, what if there are many roads that lead to the same destination? I think there are. And I guess it's a matter of, well, what makes that destination the same? So, and this is another interesting perspective. So is it the same destination? Do I arrive at the same destination if I arrive there angry versus if I arrive there feeling joy and bliss? Is the destination the same? Because certainly our perception of the destination isn't going to be the same. If I'm coming from a place of anger or frustration, my experience of that destination is going to be radically different from my experience if I were my experience if I were arriving there in a place of love, right? So is the destination the same? How do we separate the destination from the experience? So I think that that's actually another rabbit hole we get to play around. So Bernadette says, or setting what our wishes are. So I think that we can be creating our intentions, and there's a difference, and this is and I think it's a really important distinction. So at one point we had a conversation in one of these mornings about the problems with problem solving. And the problem with problem solving is that it's focused on the problem, and that essentially it's affirming the problem. And so when we create or focus our intention and our desires, as long as that desire is clean, looking at possibility rather than not the existing thing, rather than being defined by not fearful, for instance, or not defined by lack, for instance. If we say something in the negative, it's affirming that thing, right? So if our desires are clean and filled with possibility, or coming from the future rather than coming from the past, then that's a different kind of projection than the projection of this is how it should be kind of projection, if that makes sense, I'm hoping. So Bernadette says energy needs to be pure as to what our outcomes will be. And exactly. And that's what we're talking about. Like, what makes that purity? That purity is really, truly, the difference is it's coming from a place of possibility rather than a reaction to limitation. And that's a profound difference, actually. It's a profound difference energetically. And that's something that's at the foundation of any manifestation, is what's the energy, right? And the energy of possibility is unbounded. If we are being informed from the future rather than from the past, because we tend to drag the past forward, right? Unfortunately, but it's a habit, and it's something that we can be practicing shift around, right? And so Robin says, if it's your destination, you will arrive one way or another sooner or later. I love that, Robin. And that's kind of, it just brings to mind the song that Doris Day did, and I don't even know what movie it was, years and years ago. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. And I remember my mom got furious about that song at the time, because she was very much about creating our future or creating our reality. And, taking it, que sera, sera doesn't mean don't take action. It doesn't mean be passive in your life. It just means that life is unfolding in its perfection, right? That was before all the greater transformational awareness, I think. But maybe it was prescient in that way, or prescient. So I think the notion that that we have a destination, that our lives are unfolding in their perfection. I mean, I think that that's a wonderful vantage point to be living from, is that life is happening for me and through me rather than to me. And if that is so, then everything within my life is there as part of the perfect unfoldment of it. So Rosalind says the should have seems to come from fear or missing out, or fear of missing out. If disappointment has a victim role in it, what's the opposite role from being victim? Are we looking outside of ourselves for the hero? Wow, Rosalind, you just have these great comments. Okay, so what's the opposite role from being victim? Is being empowered, being embodied, I think, embodying one's sovereignty, perhaps. Please don't take these as definitive answers. This is, just me playing with you and feeling into all of these conversations. It's not that I'm not setting myself up here as a guru know-it-all. I really, truly do not know. I'm just exploring these things with you. And I think that that's what's available to us. While I may not know, I have my working hypotheses, and that's about the best that I can do, right? And maybe the best that any of us can do is to be living with our working hypotheses. And rather than, to your point, are we looking outside ourselves for the hero? I think that we get to come to a place of integration such that we can rely on our inner guidance system to help us navigate. Now, the thing is, many of us have been taught to culturally, have been taught to defer to the wisdom of others. And I'm not saying that others aren't wiser in certain aspects, that there is wisdom to be received from others and that there's guidance that's really valuable from others, etc. And when we are in alignment with ourselves, when we're truly in alignment with ourselves, we can meter when it's appropriate to be listening to the wisdom of others, and other times when we need to keep our own counsel. And I can say, having been in very unbalanced places in my life where my own guidance or my own determinations were really unbalanced and really out of line, I'm not sure how we know necessarily, like we might really believe that we know what's what, when in truth we're out in left field. So again, more questions than answers, I guess. But when we are able to be in a place of centeredness and presence, then there is a knowing that is available to us that's beyond our intellectual knowing. And what I have recognized, and I've had my clients acknowledge this, is that when they get a gut feeling, when they violate that gut feeling or they override it, it's not ever been pretty. And so to your point, Rosalind, are we looking outside of ourselves for the hero? I think that's often the case because we're feeling unbalanced and lost, and I think that there's a place that we displace our own knowing sometimes. So okay, so let's see. Hello, good morning, Lisa. Welcome. It's great to have you here joining us. And we're talking about disappointment. So Robin says, if I'm disappointed, I have allowed myself to put my feelings out there, to believe in someone else's actions. Have your boundaries. Okay, so to your point, Robin, I have allowed myself to put my feelings out there to believe in someone else's actions. And so this is where there's an expectation. And a lot of times, like I can say, well, I trusted you and you violated my trust. And so what's the expectation? The expectation is that the person's going to have the same values that I do, for instance, or the same sensibilities that I do. We make these assumptions. And, I get that it's kind of a way that we bond, so here's the projection, the expectation, projection, blame kind of thing. Okay. So let's say, and it happens around trust all the time, for example. So I say, okay, I trusted you and you didn't, this is the underlying dialogue. You didn't meet my expectation. And it's your fault that my trust was betrayed. So that's the expectation, projection, blame kind of scenario that's at the heart of disappointment. And I'm really disappointed in you because you didn't match or measure up to my expectations of who you should be. And so when we talk about trust, we can say things like, I trusted you. The thing is that we don't often really pay attention to what the nuances are around that. I trusted you to what? We give away our trust, but we're not clear about what we're trusting about. And so I trusted you to honor your word. That might be something, where someone actually makes a promise and then they don't keep it. So that can be a trust betrayed. But oftentimes it's not so blatant. Oftentimes it's, I trusted you, and the underlying conversation is to have the same values that I did, or that I do, or to see the world the same way that I do, or to think that this is as important as I think it is. I trusted you to be a certain way that I projected you are, so a lot of these things we get to understand, like if I have a friend who is always late and I make a date with them and they're not there on time and I'm disappointed, that's on me, because I was expecting them to be somebody or to show up in ways that they aren't the way that they show up, right? Like I can trust somebody to be who they are. And if they are consistently showing that they are going to be late, then I can trust them to be late, right? So this is the distinction between projection and expectation, or the versus like really being present and in alignment. Like I'm projecting and expecting, and then I'm blaming, oftentimes as part of that dynamic around disappointment, right? So Robin says open discussions. So I'm thinking that's a commentary on what we're having today, I hope. Anyway, thank you for that. And Robin says, take what applies to you from others for your highest good. Consider the rest when it's time. Yeah, like the input that we get from others is something that we get to dance with, like we get to create the context for it. We get to determine how we integrate that information. Robin says, ditto to the gut feeling. So having realized that when we get that gut feeling, for whatever reason, usually it's right. Usually that gut feeling is telling us the truth. And if we tend to override it, then we tend to pay a price for that. because the truth, you guys might be interested for the Sustainability Now movie night on April 7th. We're showing a movie called The Gut, Our Second Brain. You can look it up online. The Gut, Our Second Brain. There are more neurological connections, more brain type function in the gut, or than I think. I forget what the ratio is, whether it's more or pretty darn close to our actual brain. Like our guts know stuff that our brain doesn't know. And there is scientific validation for that, like really, truly like a second brain. And so the gut feeling is not something that is even woo-woo. It's something that, and I say that, I use that term affectionately, woo-woo. Anyway, it's documented, it's scientifically validated that the gut has its own intelligence. So let's see. Lisa says, a lot of time I found the reason for disappointment is having an ideal that doesn't exist. Yes, Lisa, absolutely 100%, absolutely true. So we have expectations, we have these ideas of the ways things should be, have no relationship to reality. We just think that that's how it should be. And then we live like the should is a real thing, you know, and then when that should thing doesn't happen, then we're disappointed. Exactly, Lisa. It's crazy. I mean, if you think about it on the surface and even deeper, it's just really nutsy. So Bernadette says, does a person who feels they have better choices and throws lies, is it an expectation or a projection? Oh my gosh, we have like 4 minutes left because I have an appointment. And Robin says, you're on a roll, Bernadette. So does a person who feels they have better choices and throws lies is an expectation or projection? So it sounds to me like you're talking to a specific situation, Bernadette. So when we lie, that's a whole other dynamic, right? Who knows what's at the root of that? Could be insecurity, could be self-defense, could be pathology. I mean, it could be any kind of dynamic. And yeah, that's kind of a sad situation, I guess. Rosalind says, navigating, if we invest time to see our desires into fruition, where does any desire come from? Are there seeds of ideas? Some grow into something. The seed we thought we planted grows into something different. So I think that when we're talking about manifesting our desires, that's a whole different story. That's having that, again, we talked about manifesting from the future, being inspired by possibility rather than dragging our past forward. So when we invest time to see our desires, where does the desire come from? Again, I think desire can come from all different places. One of the places that desire comes from is, I believe, from the inspiration that we were born with, you know, for the intention that we came here to fulfill. But there are also desires that are triggered by contrast, right? Like, I don't want this, what do I want? So you guys are on a roll this morning, all of you. It was awesome having this conversation. I love these times together. And that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. Please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network. And so much love and appreciation to all of you for these engaging conversations. Until next time.